Hi guys. So this video is kind of a continuation of Parker's birth story, if you watched that one. Except for this is going to focus more on my postpartum recovery experience. So I don't want this video to scare anybody who hasn't had their baby yet. But this video is for those of you who, like me, didn't have the best postpartum recovery experience and care in the hospital. It's for you guys, so that you feel like you weren't alone and you're heard, because it happened to me too. And it is for those of you who are having an upcoming C-section or even a vaginal birth. I mean, a lot of my experience was to do with the C-section, but some of it applies to both. But anyway, if you are having your baby soon, this is for you too. It's kind of a bit of a lesson, not a lesson, but just things to be aware of, so that you don't have my experience, or you have at least a better one. That being said, I know that lots and lots of people have had C-sections at the same hospital that I had mine, and had great experiences, and had fantastic nurses and fantastic care. So it's definitely possible, and hopefully it's the majority. Hopefully I'm the minority who had kind of a bad time. That being said, even though it wasn't as good as it could have been, it was still, you know, it was still the birth of my baby. It was still, you know, one of the best times of my life. So it was bad, but it was still okay. You know what I mean? So my last video, or not my last video, but Parker's birth story video, I think where I left off was me getting back into my private room after the surgery. But I wanted to back up a bit to just after surgery ends, when you get moved into the recovery room. So, okay, so if you watched the last video, you don't need to know about, you know, what my C-section was like, because you already know. So if you didn't watch that one and you care about that, go back, watch Parker's birth story. But assuming you've seen that and you know the deal with the C-section, okay, so once I was all sewn up and put back together, they move you onto a bed, and they take you to the recovery room, which I think is a few feet away, but for all I know, it could have been 10 minutes away, because I lost all sense of time in there. It's really weird to me, because my husband says we were there for 2 hours in recovery, and it, to me, my memory of it was like 10 minutes. Like, I really thought it was, we were there for like 10 minutes. It's so weird. I just completely lost all sense of time. But anyway, so you're lying on the operating table, and they have to transfer your body onto a hospital bed, which is the, like, just one of the weirdest sensations. But you're going through so many weird sensations during this whole experience. So they kind of put like a blanket or something under you to work as like a stretcher sort of thing. They pick your body up with a blanket, and they pick you up and they put you down on the bed. It was kind of a scary moment, because that's the first time you're gonna move after the surgery. And so I was bracing I couldn't brace myself because I couldn't feel my body, but mentally I was bracing myself like, okay, this is gonna hurt a lot. But I was so numb at that point still that I didn't even really feel my body moving. I could kind of feel the sensation of the weight of it, but it was still, once again, just like my arms and shoulders and neck and head that I could feel. It's just like this area. And so the rest of me moving, it was weird. I could see my body moving, but I couldn't feel it. It could have been a stranger's body. So they put you on the bed, They wheel you to the recovery room. And in there is when, oh god, it's such a surreal feeling even thinking about it now. Like, I was happy, obviously, because I had my baby, and I was super, super relieved that the surgery was done. So I felt good in that sense. But at the same time, that was when I also started to feel super unwell. And it's just kind of this weird feeling. It's not nauseating, it's not painful, it's just weird, like, because you're just this head and arms, and then your body just feels like, okay, well, I don't like to use this description to anyone who's gonna have to have it done because it sounds really aggressive, but I felt like roadkill.
They tore my legs off and they threw them over there. Then they took my chest out and they threw it over there.
I just felt like someone had just kind of taken the other half of my body and I was just kind of lying there. And I was losing a lot of blood, but I didn't know that. No one told me that, but my husband told me that after the fact. And they were just, like, I was lying there and I was just filling towels of blood. Like, I was lying on towels and they kept, like, throwing these towels to the side and putting a new towel down and throwing them to the side and putting a new towel down, because I was just filling these towels with blood within, I don't know, seconds, minutes. As I say, time was lost. And they're cleaning you up at that point, cleaning up your stomach and everything else, but as I say, like, I couldn't feel anything, so they could have been doing anything, but I know that's what they were doing. They were cleaning you up, and then they put a bunch of suppositories, like, they stick a bunch of Tylenol and stuff up your butt, which I remember that for some reason. For some reason I kind of felt that. But yeah, so then that happens. I remember them trying to get Parker to breastfeed. Now, Parker had a tongue tie, and they knew that at that point. So he couldn't really latch properly. I mean, they thought he was eating from me at that point, but then looking back on it, I really don't think that he was, because he never did. Like, that's a whole other story, but Parker never ended up latching, so he's been bottle fed. But anyway, so if you are to breastfeed, then it will take place at that point. It kind of did happen for me, but just unsuccessfully. And yeah, so then they wheeled me down the hallway to my room, and I think I mentioned in the last video that this is when I started to feel really panicky and overwhelmed. They're taking me down the hallway. I saw all the family members waiting out in the waiting room for me to come back into my room, and I just, like, I don't know, I don't even want to say that I was anxious. I just didn't want to be around anyone. I didn't want to be touched. I just, like, I don't know. I'm somebody who, if I'm sick or I'm in pain, I don't want anyone to touch me. Like, I'm just like, leave me to die. Like, just don't, like, just don't be involved. Don't try to comfort me. So, I saw all these faces and I was like, oh God, I have to interact. But not really, as it turned out, because the thing is that everybody's there to see the baby, not you. So they bring me into the room, and everybody comes over and they see Parker. I mean, they talk to me too, but I mean, I wasn't nearly as exciting as the baby. So at this point, my midwife had to go. Or I don't know if she had to, but she did. I remember being filled with fear at the thought of her leaving me at this hospital with these nurses. And what's funny is, at that point, nothing had happened. No one had done anything wrong to me or whatever, but I had this bad feeling, you know, this bad gut feeling that I shouldn't be left alone with them. And my husband wasn't going to sleep over there. He was going to go back to the house. But I don't know. They said that, or the midwife said, it's okay, you know, the nurses are gonna come check on you every hour. You're gonna be fine. Like, they're here for you. They're gonna help you and whatever. Which you would think would be true. And so I was like, okay. But then my mother-in-law did say to me, I really think that Rory should stay. I really think that he should stay and help you. And then I felt like it was a good idea, and oh my god, was it ever a good idea. I honestly don't know what would have happened if Rory hadn't stayed. Like, the thought of that gives me just nightmares. But you'll find out why. So she said that Rory should stay, so he agreed to stay. And at that point, everybody had visited with the baby and everybody had left, and it was just Rory and I. And my friend was going to come visit me. And when she showed up, it had been 4 hours since my surgery. And she walked in the room and she's looking at me and she's looking at my IV bag and it's completely empty. And she says, when's the last time a nurse was in here? And I said, a nurse hasn't been in here at all. They wheeled me in and then they never came back. So it had been 4 hours without anybody coming in to check on me, even though you might remember, as I just said, they're supposed to come in every hour. So I was hooked up to an empty IV bag and no one had come looked at me. So she was pissed. So she went and got a nurse and said, you know, can my friend get some care here? Like, she just had surgery and she's got an empty IV bag. And they acted like we were the crazy rude ones. They didn't say, oh, sorry that no one's came in and looked at you or filled your IV bag up. So anyway, they changed my IV out with a fresh, whatever the heck it is they put in you. And my friend was saying to me, because she'd had her baby the year before me, and she was saying to me, oh, I had such amazing nurses when I was in the hospital and they were always in here with me, helping me and checking on me. Like, I don't understand why, you know, you've just had major surgery and nobody's in here. And I still don't have an answer for that. But yeah, and like at that point I was still fine, you know, as fine as you can be when you're recovering. And she stayed for an hour and a bit and then she left. And then I think it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night at this point. And so we were gonna get some sleep, or so we thought. You know, 9:30 until the next morning. This like 12-hour period was, I don't want to say it was the worst night of my life, because it wasn't, in the sense that my son was born and like every day since he's been alive has been like the best day of my life. But yeah, it was really bad though. It was really bad, I'm not gonna lie. And it wasn't even bad from a pain perspective. I know that everybody, when they get a C-section, or I keep saying C-section, but it's not limited to that. Obviously, if you have a vaginal birth, you are in pain as well. Like, I know that. I don't know it from experience, but I acknowledge that. So don't think that I'm discrediting vaginal births, because that might be more painful for all I know. But what I'm saying is, like, everybody, no matter how they give birth, is afraid of the pain. And at least in my story, the pain was not at all the worst part. Not at all. It was the trauma and the way that I felt that I was treated. So on a pain scale, yeah, obviously I didn't feel great, but I was okay. But it was really hard because, as I said earlier, my son was tongue-tied. And he could not latch, so I could not breastfeed him. Also, my milk had not come in yet, and so I didn't have a lot to offer to begin with, but what I did have to offer, he could not get. And I was never ever someone who was really attached to the idea of breastfeeding. I'm not against breastfeeding. I wasn't against it. I was willing to try it. But I was not somebody who was going into things saying, I have to breastfeed. This is important to me. You know, I want that bonding experience and blah, blah. Like, I understand a lot of people feel that way, and that's great and fine. But just know that from day one, that was never a huge part of my journey. I was never, at any point in my pregnancy or whatever, thinking I have to breastfeed or I really want to breastfeed. So when he was tongue-tied and when he could not latch, that was not devastating to me. That was fine. You know, I gave it a real try. Like, I didn't throw my hands up at the first go, but I wasn't like, this has to work. I was just like, he needs to eat, and I don't care how he eats. So if I don't have my milk coming in and he can't breastfeed and we have to give him formula, we have to give him formula. I don't care. Like, I come from a stance where fed is best. So as long as he's eating, that's fine. I know that a lot of people probably have had nurses who believe that fed is best and supported just feeding the baby, and I think that what happened with me is unusual, because for some reason the nurses cared a lot about me breastfeeding, like way more than I cared about it. And my midwife didn't care, and I don't mean didn't care like she wasn't involved, but she understood that it didn't matter to me how he was eating as long as he was eating. And so, but she wasn't there. The thing was, my midwife wasn't there. She's gone home. She's probably asleep. And these nurses who had been gone for 4 hours or more, you know, now they come in and they're trying to get Parker to breastfeed, and he could not, or at least he would not, latch. And I kept saying, like, that's fine, like, we can give him formula, or I can pump, whatever, and feed it to him, like, a different way. And they were like, no, he has to breastfeed. And so they kept coming in every hour and forcibly milking me, pretty much. Like, they were just hands-on squeezing my boobs, trying to, I don't even know, like, I don't know what they were trying to do. They're taking Parker's head and, like, aggressively trying to get him to latch, and then they're taking their other hand and trying to squeeze him. And basically, it was just like, Parker and I just wanted no part of it. We didn't want to be involved in it. Like, Parker didn't want to latch, and I didn't want to be groped. And I could just tell that Parker and I were in agreement that this was not for us. And the nurses would not take no for an answer. And I don't know if the things that happened to me with the nurses was that I'm a young mom of this is my first baby, and they maybe thought, like, I didn't know what I was doing and I needed guidance. I don't know if that's what it was, and it came from, like, a good place where they thought, like, this girl's young and naive and doesn't know what she's doing, and they thought they were helping me. Like, I'm gonna assume that's what it was, but it was actually super traumatizing and made me feel super awful. And because they had this chart and they made me breastfeed him they said I could call it attempts, to breastfeed every half an hour. And I had to record it in this chart. And they would come in and look at the chart, and if I'd missed one of them, they would get mad at me. And, like, I had enough going on with my body, and it was, and my hormones, like, oh my god, your hormones are just, like, here, there, and everywhere. And, you know, it's so much, you know, it's so much. You're recovering physically from major surgery, or even, you know, if you had a vaginal birth, you're recovering from that. Like, that's insane. You know, hours and hours of labor and pushing, and maybe you have stitches, like you're physically recovering from that. And then mentally, you're processing the fact that you're now a mother and you have a baby. Like, that's a lot. And then you're also mentally coming down from the experience of your surgery or your labor. So you got that going on, and then like it's just so much. It's just sensory overload, just like. And so then to also have this struggle with breastfeeding, I was made to feel like I was nothing more than a body. Like, I was just like, okay, so I was on the table and you took all my insides out and you put them back together, then you sewed me up, and then you plopped my body on this other bed and you wheeled me into this room, and now I can't feel, like, bear in mind, I still cannot feel any part of my body other than my arms and my head. So now I'm lying in this bed and I can't feel anything and I can't move, but I have this baby on me and a stranger groping my boobs and basically telling me I have to do this every half an hour or my baby's gonna starve. Like, that is so much. Parker has decided he wants to join us. So, here you are. Okay, you gonna listen to me talk? So back to it being a bad night. I feel bad talking about it with Mommy. It wasn't a good night for either of us, though, was it? No. So, because Parker didn't really get to eat, he was hungry and miserable, and he screamed at the top of his lungs for pretty much the entire night. And my husband was the only one who could change his diaper, because I did not end up getting feeling back into my legs until sometime the next day. I have heard of people who have their C-section and then are up walking like 3 hours later. I was stuck in that bed. Not by choice. I mean, if the building was burning down, I would have gone down with it, because I could not have gotten out of that bed if my life depended on it. I could not feel my body. So it wasn't like I was in pain and that's why I was in bed, but it's just like I couldn't move. So Rory had to change every diaper because I, as I just said, couldn't. Which is one of the reasons why I don't even know what we would have done if Rory wasn't there, because the nurses didn't really come in and check on me that much, as you've heard. So, I mean, like, I just don't know. Like, would he have just sat in dirty diapers? Or, like, I don't know. I'm glad I don't know what happened, or what would have happened. But anyway, so according to Rory, and I can't speak to this part because I was out of it, but according to Rory, Parker pooped 5 times in 20 minutes. And I guess that's the meconium poop that everybody talks about, that they're losing, and apparently it's like tar, and it comes out kind of, not all at once, but within a short period of time. So I guess that's what that was. I wasn't present for it. I mean, I was in the room, but what ended up happening was when the nurses came in before bed, they came in at the same time that my food tray was being delivered. And so they were coming in, and so was the people from the cafeteria. And they put the tray of my dinner, the tray of my food down on the table or whatever beside me, and the nurse also put a little cup of pills down beside me, but I didn't notice her do that. And I wasn't hungry. I had no appetite. So I didn't eat my dinner. So I didn't really look at the tray, so I didn't see the pills. So I didn't take the pills. And so then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I was in excruciating pain. And so the nurse came in at one point, I can't remember why, maybe to check on me, just what an idea. And she looked at my table and she saw that the pills were still there, and she says, "Why didn't you take your pain medication?" And I said, "Well, I didn't even realize you brought it. I didn't eat my food, I didn't look on the tray." So I was behind on my pain medication, and so she gave me my pain meds. I don't know if she gave me my medicine plus something else, or if she just skipped the other meds and kicked me up to something stronger. But she basically told me, if you take this something stronger, it's gonna basically knock you out. You're gonna go to sleep. And so I was fighting to stay awake because I wanted to be mentally there for Rory and at least be some sort of moral support and not be asleep. But they gave me that strong medicine and I tried to fight it, but it knocked me out completely. Like, I was sleeping through Parker screaming at the top of his lungs. But I'm missing a big detail here. I'm missing a huge part of the story. So, at some point in the hours following my surgery, I don't know what caused this. I don't know if this was an allergic reaction to something that they gave me or what it was. I can only assume it was an allergic reaction, but my entire body was itching. And when I say itching, the word itching is not a strong enough word. Like, it felt as if I'd been bit by thousands of mosquitoes and then was having ants crawling all over my entire body. And what was weird was, even though I could not feel most of my body to move it or to touch it, I could feel the, like, ants or whatever, I could feel the itching on those parts of my body. And I was in agony. Like, that itching was worse than the pain. And so I was itching and I was hot. I felt like my whole body was on fire. And so I was asking the nurses for an ice pack or something, and they said they didn't have any ice packs, which at the time I found kind of unbelievable because you would think that a hospital would have ice packs. Like, to me, that's a standard item. But according to other people, they had the same experience in the maternity ward. They weren't offered ice packs. I guess they just don't have them there. So they were giving me, or my husband was taking face cloths and running them in cold water. But I'm not kidding you, like, he'd run the cold water and he'd put them on my body, and within like a minute the rag was hot. Like, I was burning up for whatever reason. I want to say I didn't have a fever. They never checked to see if I had a fever, so I don't know. But I was going through it. Like, I was having a bad time. And so they gave me some, I want to say Benadryl. They gave me Benadryl. And then that was before they realized I didn't take my pain medication. So then later, so that's part of the problem, was that they gave me the pain meds because I had missed the ones before, but also because they wanted to knock me out because I was in so much physical agony. Like, I was so itchy that I was just scratching at my skin. Like, I just wanted to rip the skin off my face. Like, I was so aggressively scratching my face. Like, I remember just like ripping at my body pretty much. So they wanted to pretty much just knock me out. So they did with whatever medicine they gave me. So the takeaway there for anyone having a baby soon is you really, is he sleeping? No, he's just looking down. You really want to stay up on your medication, because as soon as you fall behind in a dose, it really kicks you in the butt. Like, you go from feeling okay to you're not okay. So you really want to take your meds, and in case you have nurses that are kind of MIA like mine, what I would recommend is having your partner or you map out the times that you need to take the medication and set timers on your phone, so even if they don't come in to give you your medicine and they forget, or if they put it down somewhere and you don't see it, like what happened with me, that you're still taking it, because if you get behind, it's rough. So yeah, so she gave me that medicine and knocked me out pretty much, and I slept. My husband allegedly, I mean, I wasn't present for it, but apparently he stayed up for the whole night with Parker screaming. I have little pieces of memory of that. And yeah, so that was a really bad night. And then the next day just continued on being the same story of these nurses trying to force Parker and I to breastfeed when it's not what we wanted and wasn't working for us. And that went on all I can't remember if I was there 3 or 4 days, but it went on the whole time I was in the hospital. I had to have my midwife come in and talk to them and tell them that it was time to stop. And we were basically begging for formula. Now, in retrospect, I definitely should have just had my husband go to the store and buy our own formula. I don't know why I didn't consider that. Like, to me that's just obvious now, but for whatever reason I didn't think of that at the time. But we were getting bottles of formula from the nurse's station, but the only way we could get it is if my husband went up to a different station than the one where my nurses were working at and asked them for formula, and they would give it to him no problem. But if we asked my nurses for it, they would say no, and and I was saying to them, like, he's starving. Like, he is screaming because he's had no milk. He's not getting anything. He needs to eat. We need formula. And they were basically like, just no, they just wouldn't give it to us. So anyway, yeah, my husband ended up going to a different nurse's station every time we needed a formula. So that was consistent the whole time we were there. And then the minute we got home from the hospital, like, I was just done with breastfeeding. I never tried again. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. The tongue tie. So they knew he was tongue tied literally within minutes of him being born. They announced to me that he was tongue tied in the operating room. So they knew. And I was always under the impression that if a baby is tongue tied, they just cut it. Like, I didn't think that there was days of consideration about whether or not they were going to fix that. But for whatever reason, they did not cut it until the day we went home. And the reason why was I asked them every single day to cut it, and they kept saying to me, well, we don't cut it unless it's absolutely necessary. And I kept saying to them, well, he can't breastfeed, and you guys are insisting that he has to breastfeed, so it seems necessary. Like, if I'm not able to bottle feed him or whatever, and I have to breastfeed him, then he has to be able to latch, and he can't latch because the tongue tie, you guys already told me that, so it is necessary. And actually, because of the tongue tie, he couldn't even drink from a bottle. We had to feed him with an eyedropper until his tongue was cut. So when they finally agreed on day 3 or 4, whatever it was, to cut his tongue, then he was able to drink just fine from a bottle. He still didn't latch to me, but he did drink from a bottle at that point. We didn't have to feed him with an eyedropper anymore. And they made it this huge ordeal, like, well, we don't want to do it unless we really, 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 really have to. But they did it, and he didn't even cry. Like, he was unfazed by it. In fact, he was probably happy to have it fixed. And so that was another thing they did in the hospital that I thought was super weird, was just putting off what seemed like a necessary, not a big deal thing to do. Something else that was kind of weird was that they wouldn't let Rory hold the baby anywhere but inside the room. But I think that that's standard, and I think that that has something to do, well, originally I thought that had something to do with people taking children, because I was told originally that they don't like you to have your baby outside of your room. Your baby has an alarm attached to their foot, so if they cross a certain line on the floor on the maternity ward, it sounds, which I guess is to prevent children being stolen, which is important and great. But what was weird is that they told Rory that the reason he couldn't hold Parker outside of our room, even within this line, was that they didn't trust fathers holding babies because they thought that they would drop them or knock them out of each other's hands. The dropping part, okay, kind of understand that. The knocking out of each other's hands part of that really confuses me, and I think about that to this day. Like, what does that mean? That dads knock other babies out of other dads' hands? Like, does that mean that, like, that must have happened once, right? For them to make that rule? And what is that visual? Like, is a dad carrying his baby, walking around minding his own business, and then another dad just comes over and goes like, bam, and then knocks the baby out? Like, that's what I envision. I hope that's not what they mean, but I thought it was weird. Another thing that was annoying is that every time the nurses would switch shifts and they would, you know, one would leave, another one would come on, they always contradicted each other. So you'd have one nurse come in and they'd see your baby and they'd stick a hat on it, right? Those little knit hats they give you in the hospital. So they'd stick a knit hat on your baby and they'd swaddle them up real tight, and they'd say, you always have to keep a hat on your baby because your baby's cold. Then I've got a hat on my baby, he's all swaddled up, everything's good and fine. Then the nurses would switch shifts, and another nurse would come in, and she'd look at me holding my baby, and she'd go, oh, never have a hat on your baby indoors. He's gonna be way too hot. And she'd come over and rip the hat off. Okay, well, I won't put the hat on the baby. And then, you know, like, hours would pass, and then some other nurse would walk in, and she'd go, I can't believe baby's not wearing a hat. It was just like, you couldn't do anything right, you know? Even if you thought you were, because somebody else told you to do it, someone else would walk in and tell you you were wrong, and make you feel like this crappy mother, some idiot that doesn't know what they're doing. And I don't know, it's just like, it was just mom shame central. It was like you couldn't win for losing. At the end of the day, what was so awful about it all was not one specific thing that someone did or didn't do. It was just the general feeling of being treated like an animal. It was dehumanizing. Being in that hospital was dehumanizing. They didn't seem to care about your feelings or any sort of modesty or your beliefs or anything like that. You were just a body to them. And I understand to an extent that their job is working with bodies, and I get that, and so it's just their job, and they just see you like another body they have to look after and whatever. But the thing is that, like, you're people, you're a person, you have thoughts and feelings and fears, and you would hope that when you're going through something like that, when you're going through arguably the most life-changing experience, which I described earlier as just being a lot, you'd think that you'd have some sort of compassion from the people looking after you. And there wasn't any, for me anyway. And I didn't want sympathy, you know what I mean? Like, I didn't want someone to come in and be like, oh, like, I feel so bad for you. Like, it wasn't like that. Like, there was nothing to pity me for. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to feel like I was heard, and that my opinion and my feelings mattered, you know? I didn't want sympathy or pity. I just wanted to be able to say, this is my body, and this is my baby, and this is what I want. You know, I want you to fix his tongue so he can eat. If he can't eat from me, I want him to have formula. Like, things like that, you know? And that's when I have my next baby. And for all of you watching who haven't had your baby yet, this is the thing that I want you to take away from this video. You have to self-advocate. You have to stick up for yourself, because I don't know, you can kind of get bullied in there, honestly. I don't know if that is because of my age or because I'm a first-time mom or what it is, or if it has nothing to do with that at all, but I just would say that it's your body, it's your baby, it's your choice. It's the same thing I say about the C-section when people say you can't have an elective C-section. Yes, you can. It's your body, it's your choice, you know? You choose the way you want to give birth, and you choose everything after that too. For the rest of your baby's life, or not the rest of their life, but, you know, until they're about 18, you are going to make the call for them. You are going to be the one to make the decision on how they live and how you raise them. And that doesn't start, you know, when you're recovered and months have passed. That starts the minute that they're born, arguably the minute you get pregnant, but it starts at very least the minute that they're born. And so just because you're in the hospital doesn't mean you have to take their ideals, these nurses' ideals, and force them upon you and your family. Obviously, if it's a life or death thing, or if it's a health thing like that, and they're telling you, like, this is what's gonna save your life or whatever, yes, that's different. But when it comes to something as simple as breastfeeding versus formula feeding, or, you know, things like that, things where it's, you know, not a life or death thing, it's just a personal preference, you can't let them push you around. And it's the same with that dehumanizing feeling. And I think that's what happens, is that for me, I was so beaten down in spirit that I was kind of just letting them do whatever, because I emotionally shut down. And I've been in some really dark places in my life. I've had some very low lows and been in some very bad mental states. But I can tell you that by day 3 or 4, well, I can't remember, I had to get out of that hospital because I felt like I was going insane. I felt like I just needed to be human again. I needed to be a person again. And having somebody come in and poke and prod me and not care about, you know, any sort of past traumas that I'd had or future traumas they were creating or whatever, you know. I had to get away from there. I had to get away from the mom shame, the mom guilt. I had to get away from all of it. And I physically wanted to be in the hospital, or needed to be in the hospital longer, I would say, because I was still having a hard time getting around. But I knew that in order to leave the hospital, I had to be able to get up from my bed to the bathroom and back at the very least. And so I took every bit of strength I had in my body and I dragged myself out of that bed. And that is something that I want to discuss as well for someone who's having a C-section, just so that you're aware. When you're lying or sitting perfectly still, it doesn't really hurt. I mean, it doesn't really hurt at all. But when you move, that's when it hurts. So if you are lying down and you have to get up to a sitting position, it takes all of the strength that you have to do that. Thankfully, in the hospital you have that bed, the mechanical bed, which is why I didn't want to leave the hospital, is because I knew if I didn't have the mechanical bed, I was going to have a heck of a time moving. But you kind of have to roll to one side and grab the bar of the bed and pull yourself up. And it's a really slow, agonizing process. Once you get that, then the next step is trying to walk. Oh no, you have to stand before you walk. The next step is trying to stand. So now you've got yourself out of your lying down position. You now know how to sit up. Now you have to learn how to walk. So you have to pretend these are my legs. You have to swing them over the side of the bed. That seems like such an easy thing. It's not. It takes a lot of strength to swing your legs. And it just hurts, you know? It just hurts in your incision. But when you swing your legs, okay, now you're a third of the way there. Now you have to stand up. Standing up is the scariest part, or was for me. It feels like if you were to stand up perfectly straight, that you would rip your stitches open. You won't, but that's what it feels like. It feels like if you were to stand completely straight, your stitches would rip open and all your insides would fall out. But it won't. That won't happen. And you know what? You don't need to stand up perfectly straight. You don't need to. You can hunch over. Hunch over like an elderly woman and hobble your way to the bathroom. Because you know what? Doesn't matter if your upper half is up. You just have to get your legs moving. You have to get to that bathroom. Because once you get to the bathroom, you can get the catheter out. And oh Lord, do you want that catheter out. I remember I had the surgeon who did my C-section come in to check on me. And I said to her, this is before I'd ever tried getting up. Or no, I had tried getting up and it didn't go well. I said to her, look, I know that this isn't going to happen, but I need to hear it from your mouth. I need you to confirm for me that if I stand up, my stitches are not gonna rip open. Because it feels like they're gonna rip open. And she said, oh no, like that's not gonna happen. So once you psychologically prep yourself for walking and saying like, it's gonna be okay, then it's fine. You know, you get yourself moving and you get up and you get going. And once you're moving, you're good. Like you're so fine. Like once you've mastered walking from the bed to the bathroom, you can go home. And then once you're home, things are just better. Once I got home, I stopped taking pain medication altogether. I wasn't taking Advil or Tylenol And that wasn't because I was trying to be tough. It was just like I didn't feel like I needed it. Once I got home from the hospital, I felt so much better, pain-wise and mentally. It took a lot out of me psychologically to be in that hospital. Something else I wanted to say about C-section recovery, I don't know if this is true for vaginal births as well, but in my experience, I did not get my appetite back for weeks. And it wasn't like I was nauseous. It was just like I didn't feel hungry. I didn't feel the sensation of hunger. So I had to remind myself to eat. And I would only eat small portions. And I also couldn't feel my bladder. I couldn't feel when I had to go to the bathroom. So I think that's why I think it's a C-section thing, is because I think it's just from the numbing and from the swelling and stuff in your insides. So I had to remind myself to go to the bathroom, and I had to remind myself to eat, because otherwise I just wouldn't, because I didn't feel the sensation to go to the bathroom. I didn't feel hunger or anything like that. So just keep that in mind as well. I don't know if that's common or not, but that's one of the things that happened to me. The other thing that I wish I had known was that when you have a C-section, your baby bump kind of stays with you because of the fact that they pull your stomach muscles apart and then reach in there and it's all swollen, and then it takes months for those muscles to go back into place like they used to. And because they are separated, it creates a bit of a little bump. And I didn't know that. And so I was really hard on myself. And I felt disgusting. And I was really upset about that part of my body, and I didn't understand why I still looked pregnant. I mean, obviously not 9 months pregnant, but you know that stage in your pregnancy where you're like, oh, I'm finally showing, oh, and like it's so exciting. Yeah, well, I looked like that, and it wasn't exciting because I wasn't pregnant, and I had strangers ask me when I was due, and that was hard. So yeah, if you're gonna have a C-section, just know it will take you longer for that bump shape to go away, but it will go away. It just takes time. I'm now 6 months postpartum, and so I can tell you that 6 months later, where I'm at from the C-section, I have no pain at all in that area, or in any area. I have, my stomach muscles are almost completely back together. I obviously can walk just fine. My appetite's just fine. You know, the baby weight's pretty much gone. The only, evidence of my C-section is the scar, which is quite faint at this point. It's about, I would say, 6 inches long, and it's really not a big deal. I will say that if I touch the area around my incision, it is still numb, so I cannot feel that area. I can't feel pretty much from my belly button to where the scar is. That's not abnormal, but that's not, like, that doesn't happen to everybody. Some people, by 6 months, they can totally feel everything, but for whatever reason, I still can't feel that area. I don't really care that I can't feel that area, but I can't. Something that I just remembered that I think is important to say, because I didn't know this and I freaked out. A few days after coming home from the hospital, I got up the courage to touch around my incision, and I felt on my right side like a lump, like a big lump under the skin, like probably about the size of a grape under the skin, and I freaked out. I didn't have one on the other side, it was just the one side, and it hurt when I touched it and it scared me, and I don't know, I googled it and it came up that maybe it was a hernia or an infection or something, and so I really freaked out. But as it would turn out, that's totally normal. I suppose what happens, or what my midwife said to me, is that the side of your body that the doctor's standing on, when they're stitching you up, they're tying off all the stitches on that one side, and it creates a little ball of the stitching and scar tissue, and it takes a while to go away. So if you happen to have a lump on one side of your body right by the incision, that's most likely what it is, and that's what it was for me. And you know, 6 months later it's completely gone. So it goes away and it's fine, but it's freaked me out, so someone should tell you that that's normal. Long story short. I know a lot of people are scared of C-sections, and not everybody's crazy like me and wants to elect to have one, and I know that most people who have C-sections, it's not their decision, it's for a medical reason, and I know that's really devastating to some people, and I know that it's really scary for some people, but I just want to say that if it's something that is going to happen to you, just know that I am one of the most anxious people on the face of the earth, especially in medical situations. And I'm not somebody who has a crazy high pain tolerance or anything like that, but I'm telling you that it's gonna be totally fine. You can do it. It's really just the first few days that are the rough part, and it's not even that rough. It's uncomfortable, but I think that no matter how a baby comes out of you, it's not going to be comfortable, despite what some men have said to me about being a wimp for having a C-section. And you're gonna hear that, and it's gonna make you mad. And I'm gonna make a different video about that. But just know that you're not a wimp. You're every bit a woman and a mother as anybody else. No matter how a baby comes out of you, you had to work for it, you had to suffer for it to some degree, and so just don't listen to any of those comments. If I missed something, if you have a question or a concern and you want to ask me, you can ask me. I will answer literally anything. Nothing is too TMI for me. As you know, I love to overshare. So please, if you're ever having a question or concern about this or really anything else, or you have a suggestion for a different video and you actually like hearing me talk and you've made it to this far into the video, please let me know. I don't have a lot going on. I'm just here with Parker. We can make videos all day. So anyway guys, thank you for listening to me talk as usual. And if you're watching this because you're preparing for a C-section, I'm wishing you good luck and all the positive vibes, and congratulations on your baby. Okay, talk to you in the next one. Bye.